Just moments ago, I spoke with the president's senior counselor, Kellyanne Conway, on today's big story, General Michael Flynn. And we are back with Kellyanne Conway, the president's counselor. Kellyanne, thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, the big story today, General Michael Flynn. So the White House was told by the Justice Department last month that Flynn was vulnerable to Russian blackmail, yet he stayed in the job for, 17 days after the warning from the Justice Department. Why?
George, the General Flynn continued on the national security team and kept doing the presidential briefings, being on the leader calls. We are aware of the Justice Department opinion, but the fact is that not until yesterday, General Flynn continued in his job, and it became increasingly unsustainable for him. I
understand that, but that's my question. The question is why? The White House counsel was told by Sally Yates of the Justice Department that the General Flynn was vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Did the White House counsel tell President Trump that?
I don't know the answer to that, and President Trump has asked me to join you today to say that he accepted the resignation of General Flynn, and really the key here in that resignation is very simple. It's that the Vice President, Mike Pence, was misled by General Flynn, or General Flynn could not completely recall what his conversations had been with the Russian ambassador.
But Kellyanne, the White House knew that almost 3 weeks ago. They knew that after the Justice Department told the White House counsel, Don McGahn, almost 3 weeks ago that General Flynn had not told the truth about those phone calls and was vulnerable to Russian blackmail.
Well, these are what are in printed reports, but the fact is that I can't reveal what the White House knew or didn't know and who in the White House knew or didn't know. All I can tell you is that General Flynn, as a national security advisor to the president, continued in that role, and the president also wants me to refer everyone to the comments of Charles Krauthammer last night on a different network, wherein he makes the point that it's not this contact or this incident necessarily, it's the misleading of the vice president or the incomplete information. It's either it's being dishonest or forgetful. Well, I'd like to say that General Flynn had a 30-plus year honorable career in the military. He's one of the key intelligence officers of a generation. And we're sorry for this situation, but the president accepted his resignation and he's moving on.
But I understand what you're saying there, Kellyanne, but this is exactly the point. 3 weeks ago, the Justice Department told the White House that General Flynn was misleading the vice president, was misleading the public about his contacts with the Russians. You had that information. The White House had that information, chose to keep General Flynn in his job, chose not to correct the record, chose not to tell the public what they knew about General Flynn's phone calls. How could that be?
But George, again, I'm not here to say who knew what when, because first of all, that would be divulging information that is highly sensitive, and secondly, I don't know all the details. I haven't spoken to everyone that you're talking about in that instance. It's a very fluid situation. It was obviously very fluid into the night. We were here very late last night. The upshot of it is that General Flynn did have a conversation with Vice President Pence, apart from what you're saying in printed reports. And General Flynn assured Vice President Pence something that turned out to not be true. And that's really the key here. I think that General Flynn, in the end, decided he was a lightning rod. He did not want to be a distraction, and he tendered his resignation last night because what he had provided the vice president either was a product of misleading information or forgetfulness, and neither one was sustainable long term.
Kellyanne, I got to get to the bottom of this here. You asked to come on this morning at the president's request. The president wants you to come out and speak for the White House this morning. Do you know if the president was told 3 weeks ago, when Sally Yates told the White House counsel that General Flynn had been compromised, do you know if the president was told that?
I do not know that, George.
Do you know if the vice president was told that?
I do not know that.
Do you know why the White House chose not to correct the record for those 3 weeks?
Well, again, you're presuming that all the information you have there is completely factual and who knew what when. And this is very fluid. I mean, the bottom line is that as time wore on, as everybody continued in their roles, it became increasingly apparent, particularly over the weekend when General Flynn clarified his own earlier statement, George, a statement that he had provided to the vice president and that other members of the administration, frankly, went out and publicly repeated, which is that he had not discussed a certain topic in his conversations with the Russian ambassador. And so when General Flynn clarified those comments that it's possible and he could not recall, that accelerated matters in a way that was different, and that's where we are today.
It is a fact that the Justice Department did tell the White House counsel, Don McGahn, information almost 3 weeks ago. Final question. You said late yesterday afternoon that the President had full confidence in General Flynn. How could that be true?
Now, the President's very loyal. It just became unsustainable, and the President late last night accepted the resignation of General Flynn. Today he's moving on. It just became clear that we'll need to have acting National Security Advisor General Keith Kellogg in the role. He's been working very closely with the President for a number of months, and then of course we've been talking about former Navy SEAL and Vice Admiral Harward and David Petraeus as well, General Petraeus, as possible permanent replacements.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks very much.
Thanks, George.
And it's pretty clear from that these questions for the White House just beginning.
Why can't these questions be answered?
That is one of the biggest questions right there. Why does the President have Kellyanne Conway ask to have Kellyanne Conway come on our program today if she can't answer the simple yes or no questions about what happened with General Flynn?